When I was newly single after my 2-year relationship ended, I was back to living alone and back to swiping on Tinder and all those apps. I had been single for a few months and had met a few people during that time. During that time, I met a girl on Tinder named Tracy, and she gave me her Snapchat, but it quickly fizzled out because she was just looking at my stories and not really communicating. This used to happen all the time when I was in college, but now that I'm in my late 20s, using Tinder, and just being reminded of how immature all this online dating stuff is, it feels very different at this age. I own a corner townhouse in a small community. If you're wondering what I do, I'm an accountant. Good money, but miserably boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I was ready for the privacy and peace and quiet, but I'd say the novelty wore off after the first month. Maybe I'm more of a relationship person, or maybe I just need people around me, but being alone was getting to me. So I was constantly swiping on dating apps and trying to go on dates just to get out of the house. This was last December. I posted something on my Snap story that had to do with Christmas, and guess who commented on my story? It was this girl, Tracy, who I hadn't talked to in weeks. She struck up a conversation about us doing some Christmas-themed stuff together, and from there we started chatting for a bit. I suggested the most festive things I could think of: ice skating, going to the village, and looking at the decorations. But she suggested that we decorate my Christmas tree. First of all, I had a fake tree, but it was up in the attic. So I told her I didn't have it up yet because it's kind of a 2-person job to get it out of the attic. She said she'd like to come over and help, so I figured why not. I told her to come over around 9 that night. It was dark by the time we made the plan. Man, it was probably around 7:30 because I remember quickly grabbing my keys and rushing to the liquor store to buy a couple bottles of wine. When I got back to the house, I vacuumed and swept the floors. Since my breakup, my girlfriend had left me to clean the place, and I realized how quickly a place can get dirty. 9 p.m. rolled around, and I was sitting up straight on the couch with the TV on, pretending I was just chilling in the living room watching a movie. By now, I had everything set up to be comfortable and relaxed, but I sat there for a while waiting for her to send me a message or for the doorbell to ring. I sent a follow-up message saying, "Let me know when you're on your way." And eventually, I started to think she was flaking. Finally, around 9:30, she said she was outside. She came in, and I was shocked to find myself looking up at her. She was a few inches taller than me. I'm 5'10", so she had to be at least 6'2". I also immediately noticed that she smelled like she was drenched in perfume. We went straight to the couch and sat down, and she sat very, very close to me, like our legs were touching. This is where I started to get confused about what I was feeling. She looked a little older, maybe a little rougher. I'm not sure how to explain it. And underneath that overpowering smell of cheap perfume, I couldn't help but feel that there was a slight hint of body odor, which completely turned me off. I asked her if she wanted some wine, and she said, "Yes, please." So I went and poured a couple of glasses while we talked. Have you ever met someone for the first time that you've been texting or DMing for a while, and when you finally meet them, they're not at all what you pictured in your head? This was pretty much it. Something about her seemed off, like she was missing certain social cues. I handed her a glass of Merlot, and we cheesed each other. I kid you not, she almost immediately spilled a huge drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I collected myself, but I wanted to scream. I said, "It's okay," as I ran to the kitchen to get a wet paper towel and a sponge. I ran back to the couch and dabbed as fast as I could before it set. She kept apologizing, and I kept telling her it was okay. After that, things got a little more tense, and to break the tension, I suggested getting the tree out of the attic. So I went up to the attic, slid over the huge box with all the parts of the tree in it, and started handing her the pieces down one by one, each piece getting bigger and bigger until we got to the biggest part, the part that I wouldn't be able to get down the ladder by myself. She grabbed it with ease. I had to remember this girl's height. When everything was delivered, I went back downstairs and we put up the tree in the living room with Christmas music playing. I poured more wine for her and drank more myself. I loosened up a bit. More wine makes any situation feel better. Once we had the tree up, the next step was the ornaments. I told her that my ornaments were all in the crawl space. These ornaments were all from my childhood. My parents gave me boxes and boxes of Christmas ornaments, so I went down to the crawl space and started taking out the bins one by one, while I left Tracy in the living room to relax. As I was doing all this, I started to feel woozy, like the wine was going to my head. I've never been a heavy drinker, so I have a low tolerance, but I felt like I hadn't drunk that much to feel that way. I grabbed the first container and started dragging it up the stairs. When I got to the top, Tracy wasn't anywhere in sight. I assumed she was in the bathroom and called her name. I looked around each room and then saw that the bathroom was empty. I scratched my head in confusion as I kept calling her name. I went to send her a message on Snap, but she never opened the Snap. I also checked the 2 bedrooms, but she was gone. I couldn't believe it. She was sneaking out on me. That's when I started wondering if she thought I was ugly or weird or something, although honestly, I wasn't that into her either. I crashed on the couch, which suddenly felt a lot more comfortable than before, and honestly, as far as I can remember, I checked my phone periodically to see if she opened my Snap and just watched whatever was on TV until my memory just faded to black. I swear everything just went black, and then I woke up in the dark, no lights, no TV on. I looked around the dark room and I knew I was hearing things. I felt like I was still on the couch and I felt weak. My limbs were hard to move, but within seconds I managed to find my phone right underneath me. I checked the time. The second the screen of the phone lit up, I saw it. Even though the light was facing me, the glow from my phone screen with the brightness turned all the way up revealed the outline of a tall person's silhouette standing in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream. I just put the phone down and the room went back into darkness. I finally opened my mouth to say, "Tracy," hoping it was her, but still not remembering what had happened earlier. Whoever was standing there didn't answer me. Eventually, I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight, and I saw that it was actually Tracy standing in front of me. She wasn't moving, she was just looking down at me. I felt trapped on the couch. I don't know if it was out of sheer fear or the effects of whatever she had obviously given me. I really had a hard time moving my limbs. I felt weak and helpless. All I could manage was to say "Tracy" a few more times. She turned toward the stairs, and again, I swear, she sprinted toward them. And all I heard was the disturbingly loud pounding of her feet as she ran down the stairs. I heard something slam from downstairs. Looking back, I could have sworn it was the front door. Everything looked and sounded so shaky in those first few minutes after I woke up. With each passing minute, I felt more lucid, and moving became easier. I checked Snapchat to see that her account was gone. She had blocked me. I looked out the front window and I saw no cars outside except my own and the neighbors, and then I realized that I never saw the vehicle she arrived in, or if she arrived in one at all. I checked my entire house from top to bottom, looking for anything that could have been stolen. The only items I found missing seemed a little bizarre at first, but honestly made so much sense soon after. Every single bottle of pills from my house was gone. All my vitamins and supplements, my bottles of Adderall, and even the bottle of Oxy that I had been prescribed but never fully used after a surgery. They were in the drawer next to my bed. I also noticed that a bottle of vodka was taken from my mini fridge in my room, but other than that, I didn't see anything else that could have been stolen. Nevertheless, I called the police immediately and reported the robbery. I gave the Snapchat username and explained that I never got her number or really knew anything about her identity other than the name she gave me, which was Tracy Gibson. The police knocked on my neighbor's door because all of our houses are connected. Even though it was about 1 a.m. and I was standing next to them, they asked if he had seen or heard anything strange, to which he said no. He'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the police left. I made sure all my keys were still in place to make sure she couldn't get back in, but other than that, this Tracy person disappeared without a trace. I knew from the first few minutes of meeting her that her behavior was quirky and erratic, and it makes so much sense now. I won't even call it a theory because I just know it's the truth. I think this girl, or woman, I should say, was older than she claimed to be, and she was possibly homeless with a serious drug addiction. I think she was drowning herself in perfume to cover up the body odor that, frankly, was still coming through. She spiked my wine with something when I was in the attic. Of course, I don't know exactly how long I was out, but it was enough for her to search my entire house for any and all drugs and supplements. I still remember how disturbing it was to see her tall silhouette standing in front of me as I was just waking up on the couch. Honestly, I didn't even decorate the tree that year after that. This happened on Christmas Eve 1997 when I was 7 years old. Since we're Jewish, we don't celebrate Christmas, so Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. Our dad is a doctor, and because he's Jewish, he's always on call at the hospital during the Christmas holidays, so he wasn't home that night. That left my little sister and me alone for the evening while our dad worked. Technically, our mom was home, but to be honest, she was an alcoholic at the time. As a 7-year-old, I had no idea what alcoholism was. All I knew was that when it got dark, my mom was always passed out and almost impossible to wake up from. Sorry if this sounds harsh or TMI, but it's relevant to my story. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the oldest, I went to see who it was. Our door had glass built into it, so it was easy to see who was on the other side. There was a man standing outside in a Santa suit holding a bag, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved for me to come to the door. I went to the door but did not open it, and I thought it was strange that someone dressed like Santa Claus would come to our house from any house in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me, Santa Claus. Let me in. I'll give you your presents." I remember telling him point blank that Santa Claus wasn't real, and that if he was, he wouldn't give presents to Jews anyway. He said, "Of course I'm real." I used to only visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get presents. So this year, I changed the rules so that you can get presents too, but I didn't buy it. And instead, I remember getting angry with him, arguing that Jews get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah, not Christmas. The smile fell from his face, and all of his cheerful charm disappeared as he began to demand that I open the door. I told my sister to call 911, and the guy seemed to run away. We called the police, but unfortunately, the operator didn't understand what we were saying. Looking back, I think she may have thought we were just little kids excited about Santa coming to our house. Anyway, she didn't take us seriously and instead just told us that this number should only be used for emergencies before hanging up. My sister and I got really scared because we didn't know who else to call. Since we were only 4 and 7, the only numbers we knew how to dial were our home number and 911. And since it was the 90s, my dad didn't have a cell phone yet and I didn't know what the hospital number was to reach him there. Since it was impossible to wake up our mom, we were basically on our own. We hoped the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later, he knocked on the door again. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and to let him in or we'd be in big trouble. My sister started crying and ran upstairs to wake my mom. Not knowing what else to do, I did the only thing that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we keep for our menorah and lit them all, then ran downstairs to where the smoke detector was. I quickly blew out all the candles before throwing them all up at the smoke detector. Luckily, they gave off enough smoke to set off the smoke detector. As an adult, I realized how stupid that was. And luckily, I did not accidentally set the house on fire. But all I knew at the time was that the smoke alarm would immediately call 911 for me and send help to our house. There was a fire department not even 2 minutes away from our house, so they got here pretty fast. My sister came downstairs scared of the fire alarm, but I told her there was no fire and not to go outside but to wait inside with me. To my amazement, the guy still did not leave. Instead, the bastard ran over to the firemen and probably told them he was glad they showed up. I wanted to do something festive. It was pitch black and snowing. We turned up the heat in the house and started to prepare the dinner we had bought, which was chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was pretty much a grab bag. We ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights on in the corner, giving the room a nice cozy glow while we watched the Polar Express. It was the only good Christmas movie on any of the streaming platforms. If you can't tell, we really love Christmas. After the movie, and when we felt we had digested enough, we went out on the patio to jump in the hot tub. I turned on all the decorations and Christmas lights in the front yard, and as we sat in the hot tub watching the snow fall, it felt like bliss. Until the bubbles on the hot tub stopped and it went quiet. We heard unmistakable footsteps coming from somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I looked at each other. I asked her if I should yell, "Who's there?" but she said no. The footsteps went on and on until they were no longer audible. I told Charlotte it was probably a deer, but deep down I knew it was the footsteps of a person. After the hot tub, we went to take a shower before bed. The hot water in the shower didn't last more than maybe 2 minutes. Something was wrong when the water went ice cold. We screamed and jumped out of the shower. I texted Mike, the host, about it. He replied within half an hour and said, "That's weird, and he'll have a guy come out tomorrow and look at the water heater." After our half shower, we went to bed. In the middle of the night, however, we were awakened by very aggressive banging on the front door of the house. Charlotte shook me, frightened. I said, "I'll go see who it is," but she told me to stay in bed and not make a sound. Frankly, I was glad she said that. No part of me wanted to know who was at the door in the middle of the night. I think there were 3 sets of really loud and angry-sounding bangs before they stopped. We sat in silence for a few minutes, whispering to each other. I went over to lock the bedroom door for extra security, I guess. The minutes dragged on, but eventually, after about half an hour of sitting wide awake, we drifted back to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Mike again about the knocking at the door. He responded more quickly this time and seemed pretty confused, as did we. He basically said how strange it was and that he didn't know why someone would be wandering around so late at night. He said if it happened again, we should alert the authorities. Honestly, not the most reassuring answer, but I mean, he was right. What else could he tell us? Grab a gun and shoot whoever was at the door? I didn't want to be complaining to Mike all the time, but I mean, these were some legitimate concerns that I was raising with him. There was a lot of snow outside, and it was a dark, cloudy day. There were still some flurries falling on the ground. I went out to wipe the snow off my Jeep, and as I was doing so, I noticed footsteps in the snow. They were looping around the house. I remembered the knocking the night before and wondered if it was the same person. But these footprints looked fresh, and it had snowed all night. Surely the footprints from last night would have filled in by now. I actually heard footsteps approaching now, and I saw Tom from around my car. I told him about the water heater problem and that Mike said they would send someone to look at it. He said he knew and that he was actually here to take a look at it. I also told him about the knocking on the door last night and the footprints in the snow. I even showed them to him. He looked at them and said, "There are a lot of strange people out here snooping around at night." I asked if we shouldn't use the hot tub at night, and he said, "No, it shouldn't be a problem. The people here are harmless." He went into the house and walked around for a while before going down to the basement. He told me he was going to take a look at the water heater. Tom seems like a weird guy, honestly. I texted Mike and said, "Tom's here now looking at the water heater." Mike replied and asked, "Is Tom the name of the plumber?" And I replied, "No, your brother." He said, "What do you mean?" He said, "He's my brother." It started to click in my head. I said, "Do you have a brother named Tom who runs this Airbnb with you?" And he said, "No, who is this person?" I rushed over to Charlotte and told her to get her things quietly. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. We packed our bags, grabbed all our stuff, and took it outside to the car in one go. I'm sure we left behind a charger or something small, but who cares? We got in my car, and as I started it, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Tom coming up on the back of the Jeep. I put it in drive and drove out of there as fast as I could. When we were back on the road, we called Mike and explained everything and told him to call the police right away. He didn't stay on the line for long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. We were still in the car. He said the police were there now and they didn't see anyone in the house. Mike was on his way to the house as well, but mostly he was calling to get more details from us. We drove around and explored the area just to calm our nerves after what had just happened. After a few hours, we went home. Mike texted me later that night to give me an update and apologize for everything. He said he didn't know anyone who resembled my description of Tom. What bothers me is that this man was watching us the whole time, from the moment we arrived until we were in the hot tub, and he was probably the one banging on the front door in the middle of the night. Who knows what his intentions were? It's a good thing we left when we did.